Moving on to my topic, the golden bird of the world, they call India. I think around before the British rule, India was contributing around 25% or a quarter of the world economy was controlled by the Indian subcontinent. So, my topic: stories of peaceful coexistence from the past. So, it's the topic is self-explanatory. Uh, we know how tense and volatile the situation is these days. When Musa alayhi salam, when he hit the sea with his staff, the sea split. The unimaginable happened. Today, the evil forces of communalism, casteism, and racism have thundered down on the human race so hard that the split has rendered people so far away from each other. In a country like India, which has achieved so much in the areas of technology and development, it is disheartening to see a stall, a slow growth in the in the heart of what do you say, like holistic development, that is social progress. So people are otherized. It's us versus them. It's us versus them, and it's always us versus them now. And what happens is violence follows, and this violence that usually happens is often orchestrated under the label of religion. So let me repeat that. It happens under the label of religion, not religion itself, because religion teaches us Vasudeva Kudampakam, which means all people are our family. Religion teaches us to love thy neighbor. Religion proclaims that he who goes to sleep while his neighbor is hungry will never see the gates of paradise. Religion teaches us, Ya ayyuhan nas, inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha wa ja'alnakum shu'uban wa qaba'ila li'ta'arafu. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. Inna Allaha alimun khabir. So it's quite clear that religions have always taught us to accept the reality of the existence of people of other faiths amongst yourself. So the problem, the way I see it, that we are facing today, is one of the problems, I'd say, is the intentional distortion and misrepresentation of history that generates hatred among the masses, which in turn lays the foundation of communal violence that unfortunately, may Allah protect all of us, has skyrocketed rocketed these days. So this violence, it only further polarizes people. It only further polarizes society, leaving it in a devastated, irreparable, and torn to shatters position, taking us to which will take us to a time where the unborn child, like in the Quran it says, وَإِذَا الْمَوْءُودَةُ سُئِلَتْ بِأَيِّ ذَنْبٍ قُتِلَتْ. Mother, why was I killed? What wrong did I do? So, and also, the very popular, verse in the Quran: whoever saves an innocent soul, it is as if though he has saved all of humanity. So here in this session, what I'd like to do is to take us through certain events from the past, in the hope that we revisit our Indian history and search for narratives that that transcends communalism. So these stories are usually untalked about and not discussed. Many people know about it, but they're not discussed in the school curriculum. I wonder why. Because probably because it's not discussed in our educational system, because our education system, if I know it rightly, was laid by the British colonial rule, who also happens to be the pioneers of divide and rule. So let me begin. So once upon a time, there lived a king by the name of Abdul Fattah Jalaluddin Muhammad Akbar. You all know Akbar, yeah? So that was his full name. So now Akbar had a very staunch enemy, and his name was Maharana Pratap Singh. Things were not so good between them, so they decide to settle it for once and for all on the grounds of Haldigati. So now there is Akbar's so there is in the Akbar's army on one side and Rana Pratap's army on the other side. But here comes a twist. In Akbar's camp, there is no Akbar. So for whatever reason, and instead representing Akbar in Akbar's army was his most trusted general, and he was a Hindu. His name was Raja Man Singh. And under Raja Man Singh, you had the other Muslim commanders and soldiers and whatnot. And on the other side, in Raja Pratap Singh's camp, you have the general of the army, and his name was Hakim Khan Sur. So you have two armies, one that of Akbar and the other of Maharana Pratap Singh. The Muslim kingdom was a Hindu kingdom, and they are going to battle. And you have a Hindu representing the Muslim army and a Muslim representing the Hindu kingdom. So let me ask you: is this a battle between two religions, like some fascist groups claim today, or was it two kingdoms fighting for power? I'll leave it for you to ponder. Also, you probably have heard of the Navaratnas of Akbar's Darbar. Darbar as in the court. This was the nine jewels of his court. Navaratnas. Simply put, the most important and trusted people to him. Birbal, the famous one was of course one of them, and there's another guy. I'd say probably more important. His name was Raja Todarmal, and in my opinion, he was more important because he was to Akbar what Nirmala Sitaram is to Modi today. So because he held the keys to Akbar's humongous treasury. You can see the irony here. The treasury to the Mughal Empire was held by Raja Todarmal, a Hindu. Another fun fact, there was a temple inside Akbar's castle, a Krishna temple, and it is said that he used to participate in the festivities there, like the Krishna Janmashtami and stuff like that. Anyway, coming to a Hindu king, uh, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. This guy is so popular in Maharashtra that they have named their airport, their railway station, and even their vada pav. They call it the Shiv vada pav. Yeah, and on the right you can see a picture of Shivaji Maharaj. This picture that you see here usually instills fear amongst Muslims because you see this picture is usually used by those factions who like to stick with the twisted or the twisted version of history. I say we will see in a moment how this. We'll see in a moment if this guy was actually anti-Muslim. Was he like was he was he actually feared by the Muslim masses back then? There's a very famous story between him and Afzal Khan. The story of Afzal Khan, it's a common tale among these guys. So one day, Afzal Bhai, he called Shivaji for a meeting, and Shivaji, the brave man that he is, sets on his horse, sets out on his horse, and but on the way one of his bodyguards stopped him because he wasn't wearing any armor or carrying any arms, swords or anything of that sort. So this guy, the bodyguard, hands him the bagnak. Bagnak is basically iron claws, and you can wear it like a ring and no one would notice it. It's like a hidden thing. Smart thing to do, because when Shivaji finally meets Afzal Khan, the first thing Afzal Khan he does is he rushes to Shivaji and strangles him by the throat. But Shivaji, he got the bagnak, so he plants him deep into the belly of Afzal Khan. Afzal Khan, he drops dead. So this story is widely known, but how the brave and not so heavily built Shivaji Maharaj single-handedly killed the heavily built Pathan, that is Afzal Khan. But not many people know that the bodyguard who gave Shivaji the killer idea, he was a Muslim by the name of Rustam-e Jamal. So Shivaji had 18 generals. Rustam-e Jamal was one of them. And out of these 18 generals, 12 of them were Muslim. Can you imagine that? A Hindu ruler, 12 out of 18 generals in his government, they were Muslim. There were also other people like Ibrahim Gardi, Siddhi Sambal, and Daulat Khan. and Maulana Haidar Ali. Maulana Haidar Ali, it is said that he was the confidential secretary of Shivaji. Moving on. Now we come to the fire-breathing tiger of Mysore. Who was this? Tipu Sultan. Everybody knows about him, yeah? So APJ Abdul Kalam, he makes a very lengthy mention about he makes a very lengthy mention of a painting in the reception lobby of NASA in his book, The Wings of Fire. The picture actually caught his attention during one of his visits to America as a young scientist. The picture showed dark-skinned men in a battle. He was surprised. When he took a closer look, it revealed that this was the army of Tipu Sultan fighting the British, the first missile man of India, because it was his army that actually used missiles in a battle, I'd say metal projectiles for the first time, and it was against the British. So Tipu Sultan was naturally hailed as the tiger of Mysore, but was he a murderer of Brahmins? Was he a tyrant who destroyed temples because they were places of worship of the other faith? We'll see in a moment. So Tipu was in battle with the Marathas. So once the Marathas, they attacked Tipu's kingdom, and the battle ended in, you could say, sort of a tie. The the enraged and the irritated Maratha army on its way back, because they didn't have a clear win, so they were naturally irritated, and it was a long battle. And on their way back, they attacked a temple at Sri Rangapatnam, and you know that Sri Rangapatnam is under Tipu. And the temple that they attacked, it was no ordinary temple. It was the it was the Shrinkeri Mutt, and the Shrinkeri Mutt, if I have read correctly, it was founded 1,000 years ago by Adi Shankaracharya. So it is a very important place of worship for the Hindus. So the question is, the Maratha attacked the Shrinkeri Mutt. So were they actually against Hinduism? Were they trying to insult Hindus and their deities by looting the temple, killing many Brahmins living there, and disfiguring, desecrating the idol? Of course, no. I mean, it's quite clear that they were just trying to insult their enemy, that is Tipu Sultan, because they didn't have a clear win. So so what happens is, once when the Maratha army leaves the premises, the head priest of the temple, his name was Shankaracharya Kotipitam, and this was one guy who Tipu addressed as Jagat Guru. It is like a huge title with lot of reverence and respect. So he wrote to Tipu describing what had happened, what the Maratha army had done to the Shinkari Mutt. And Tipu's response was amazing. He responded by restoring and sending many valuable gifts to the temple, and he restored the temple, building it all over again, reconstructed it basically. And so that's the story about the temple destruction that happened in Tipu's time, one such instance. And it is interesting, talking about killing Brahmins. Tipu's right hand man, he was a guy by the name of Purnaya. And amazingly, Purnaya was a Brahmin himself. So you can do the thought process from there on. It is said that, when the British destroyed the city walls of Tipu, and Tipu was sure to be defeated, which means that if the British caught him, his death was imminent, because he was such a fierce, annoying enemy of the British. They just couldn't defeat him for a very, very long time. So, his defeat was very close. He was close to being, sorry, he was so close to being captured. So that is when the French at that time, they offered Tipu a safe passage to escape. Tipu, amazingly, he rejected this idea and chose to stay with him, with his people, and therefore died fighting the British invaders. Yeah. So, talking about one important topic that I'd like to brush through in this session is about the temple destruction. A picture of Tipu. Yeah, interesting. This is one picture on the right, as you can see. Uh, the left is the picture that you see in the museums and places. The other one on the right is being circulated these days. This, I dug it up a little bit. It is not actually Tipu. It was another guy named by a name Tipu Tib, and he's actually a slave trader from Zambia. So this is not actually Tipu on your right. The guy on the left, that is Tipu for you. All right, moving on. Uh, so I talked about, so now these days you hear a very strong claim about the destruction of temples. At 60,000 temples were raided, looted and destroyed during the medieval Muslim rule in India. And I looked it up a little bit, and I stumbled upon a person by the name of Professor Richard Eaton. He's a professor at the University of Arizona who specializes in the social and cultural history of pre-modern India. Richard argues that only 80 temples were destroyed during the span of around 800 years of Muslim rule in India. So uh, he says it's not 60,000, but it's 80 only. But 80 is not a small number. So what we're going to do is discover, we'll dig a little deeper and see what were the reasons. And similar views were also held by people like Kate Brittlebank. She's an author who's written extensively on the Muslim rule in India, especially about Tipu Sultan, and Bailey. Yeah, Susan Bailey. She's a professor of historical anthropology in the University of Cambridge. So the question is 80 or 60,000, and Richard and people like Kate and Susan, they argue it is 80 and not 60,000. So it can be deduced that the attack, this number itself, from this number itself, it can be deduced that the attack on temples were not random, and they would be random if it were some sort of a religious obligation, like if you're a Muslim, you're supposed to destroy the Hindu temple or the places of worship of the other faith. If that was the case, then no there would be no temple in India right now, because 800 years of Muslim rule over India. And if there was a clause which says in the Muslim religion, if it says as a religious obligation to destroy the temples, then there would be no temples. So, and when you look at this 80 that was destroyed, you see that every destruction, we see it had a context. And like Zakaria Sab said, most of these temples were associated with power. That is, they were associated with the ruling family, and these temples, like Zakaria Sab said, they were repositories of wealth then and now. So those temples were chosen for destruction that would strike a heavy blow into the enemy's wealth and image. Yeah, the Turks appeared in the 12th century, whereas it can be seen that the history of temple destruction, dates back to the 8th and 9th century. So you can see that in the history, the temple destruction didn't actually start with the Muslim rulers, Muslim invasion of India. It dates back way further. Manu Salasa, it was a document written by Somasara, this is pre-Turkic rule, pre-Muslim rule in India, by Somasara II. He recommends the destruction of holy sites of the enemy as a tactic of war to humiliate political power. And so we can see that these events are seldom affiliated to establishing religious supremacy. The down south, the Chalukyas and the Cholas, they also had a habit of seizing valuable artifacts during their temple raidings. Talking about Tipu, I happened to go through one of the Kannada author, Girish Karnad. I think he passed away last year. He said that if Tipu wasn't a Muslim, he would be treated like how Shivaji is treated in Maharashtra, which means that the Bengaluru airport would have been called Tipu Sultan. But it's no surprise that much of the propaganda that is that is being spread around, or that is being believed now, was spread by the East India Company, because, as you know, Tipu was one of their toughest enemies. Uh, so moving on, as I kept reading about these stories about temple destruction, I wondered if any masjid, a Muslim place of worship, had faced a similar fate. And I found one, and that too from my native place, Mishkal Mosque. You can see the picture, amazing architecture, I'd say. Mishkal Mosque is located in Kozhikode, okay, and the masjid had something mysterious about it. I always thought, because its architecture was so different from the typical dome minaret types you see up north. Mishkal Mosque, it was built by an Arab trader by the name of Nakuda Mithkal. That's why the name Mishkal. They say it was built by the same group of workmen who worked on the palace of the Zamorin, the Samudri. 600 years after it was built, the Portuguese attacked the Zamorin kingdom and unleashed destruction, and Mishkal also took a hit. The Zamorin and his people, they were, really sorry for what happened, because they couldn't protect the mosque. So, but they waited. Him and his people waited, I think, for around 50 or 60 years. And when the time was right, they attacked the Portuguese fort, and it is recorded that they left no stone on top of the other. That was the extent of the destruction that was that took place at the Portuguese fort. I think it is in Chalian. Not only that, they brought back the stones and the wood, and they laid it in the yard of the Mishkal Mosque. And so you see, it was actually this was actually a symbolic act to avenge what the Portuguese had done to a place of worship of their people, the Muslims. But this was a Hindu king. The Portuguese, they brought blood and hate into Zamorin's land. Yeah, but together, this Hindu king and his Muslim subjects, they chose a greater deal. They chose by preserving the Mishkal Masjid, both as a house of God, and it was left as a timeless principle. Um, Back in school, if someone had asked me, whose rule would you find more Hindu officials? Was it in Shah Jahan or Aurangzeb's rule that you would find more Hindu officials? I would, without an iota of doubt, say Shah Jahan. But a little bit of digging would reveal so much more about about Aurangzeb, the hot political potato that he is today. And I think they are in the process of renaming many streets that are under his name. Anyhow, the percentage of Hindu officials in Aurangzeb's government was 34, as opposed to 22% in Shah Jahan's rule. So it's amazing that Shah Jahan comes and he goes, Aurangzeb comes up, and Aurangzeb's government had more Hindu officials than Shah Jahan's government. In fact, Raja Rai Singh was his most important general. A Hindu general was Aurangzeb's most important general. He even bestowed him by the name of by the title Savai, which signifies his rank higher than the other generals. I think the Jantar Mantar was Jai Singh's idea. Anyway, going back to the topic of temple destruction, there is a rather interesting and I'd say more like bizarre account on the destruction of the famous Kashi Vishwanath temple by Aurangzeb. You can find it in the works of late B.N. Pandey. He was a freedom fighter and ex-governor of Orissa, and in the writings of Pattabi Sitaramaya, who was an Indian independence activist and political leader from the state of Andhra Pradesh. The narrative both of them put forward, with a few differences in details, is that Aurangzeb, along with his kings and their Ranis, they were on a tour. They were on an entourage to Kolkata when the Ranis requested a stopover near Kashi, so they could, take a dip in the holy Ganga. Aurangzeb, he agreed, And the Ranis went there, they took a dip and they came back, except for one Rani. The Rani of Kutch was missing. Aurangzeb, he sent out a search party, top generals and detectives of the time and whatnot, and they found the Rani under the temple in a very bad shape, depraved of her ornaments and whatnot. Uh, Aurangzeb was furious. He decided to to raise down, to bring down the temple, where such a dirty, where such a heinous crime had taken place. Interestingly, the Rani requested that a masjid be built in the place uh, of the destroyed or the demolished temple. And so it was a Rani, according to this narrative, who requested that a masjid be built in the place of the temple that was demolished. And the linga, the idol of Vishnu, was shifted from that side to a nearby structure. And to this day, it shares boundary with the Gyanwapi Mosque. That was the name of the masjid that was built. The authenticity of the story has been challenged. It's a bizarre story, and the authenticity of the story has been challenged. I looked up for a guy. I looked up for people who has challenged the stories, and one person I found was a guy named by the name of Cornard Elst. Okay. Um, he's from, I believe, from Germany, and he's known to be openly Islamophobic and has been criticized by academics for his far right and fundamentalist narratives. uh, Alexander Hamilton. He was a British historian who toured India towards the end of Aurangzeb's 50-year reign and 50-year rule, and he observed that everyone was free to serve and worship God in his own way. So if Aurangzeb had the intention of demolishing temples to make way for mosque, you see that no single temple would be standing erect in India today. On the contrary, you can see that Aurangzeb donated huge estates for use as temple sites. The Farman in the historic Balaji or Vishnu temple, even today, uh, located at Chitrakoot, it's in Madhya Pradesh. It still shows that it was commissioned by the emperor himself. So the priest at this temple at Balaji, there are two things that he holds very valuably. That is, one is the idol of Vishnu, and the other is the Farman of Aurangzeb. They still have it to this day. Uh, an author that I'd like to mention is Audrey Trusk. Yeah, she wrote a book by the name of Aurangzeb, The Man in the Bit. I couldn't lay my hands upon it, haven't gotten it yet, but I happened to watch one of her interviews, and she's come across a lot of firing for it, and I think it is something that we all should read. Moving on, unlike the British, the Muslims came, they saw, they conquered, and most importantly, they settled in Hindustan. For example, Akbar married a Rajput princess. Their son Jahangir married another Indian princess, and therefore Aurangzeb, their grandchild, was less Turkic and more Indian. So you cannot say that he was an outsider. He was already an insider. He was already more Indian, probably more Indian than many people who claim to be Indian today. They integrated into the Indian society in almost every way possible. The Qutub Minar, yeah, you can see that's a map of the Qutub Minar. The Qutub Minar, it not only has inscriptions from the Quran, but it also has hymns, the praises of the local gods in Devanagari scripts, the Devanagari scripts, inscribed by the local artisans, back then. So it is amazing, and you see those coins there. When Muhammad of Gori, he set out to mint coins, make coins. He chose the existing ones the existing ones, as you can see in this picture, leaving the horse and the bull, or the image of Saraswati in the second picture down. You can see that is the image of Lord Saraswati. He left it intact on the other side, and he chose to inscribe his name in Devanagari script, other than on the other side, and he didn't choose the Arabic script that was the normal practice of the Muslim rulers back then. But when they came to India, this is what they did. So these are two coins. One is it says La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, and in Devanagari script, I think I found it says Avyaktam Eka Muhammada Avatara Nirpati Mahamuda. Anyway, so that was the so that was I think more or less what I had to say. So today medieval India is seen as a place of eternal religious conflict. But what I feel is that history is more what I feel is that this is more due to the modern day politics than the actual events of history. The truth is that Indian history is much more layered, but our understanding is not. And then that is all I got. Thank you once again for this wonderful opportunity. I did learn a lot. Jazakallah khair. May Allah help us overcome this tough times that we are going through. Like they say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Inshallah, this too shall pass. And like our beloved Prophet Muhammad said, amazing is the affairs of the believer. If something good happens, he's thankful for it, and that is good for him. And if something bad happens, he bears it with patience, and that is also good for him. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.